Rain poured over the streets of Chicago as people hurried home, trying to escape the cold November evening. Among them walked Daniel Brooks, a 35-year-old single father who had already endured more heartbreak than most people experienced in a lifetime. 5 years earlier, Daniel had lost his wife Emily to cancer. They had dreamed of having children, but life had other plans. Since Emily's passing, Daniel lived alone in the small house they had bought together. He worked as a city bus mechanic during the day and spent evenings repairing old furniture in his garage to earn extra money. Life wasn't easy, but Daniel had made peace with loneliness, or so he thought. One rainy night after finishing work, Daniel stopped by a neighborhood diner for coffee before heading home. As he walked back to his truck, he noticed something unusual near the alley behind the restaurant. A little girl. She couldn't have been older than 8. She sat curled against the brick wall, hugging a torn backpack. Her clothes were soaked. Her tiny hands trembled from the cold. Most people walked past her without stopping. Daniel almost did too. But then he remembered Emily's words. Kindness costs nothing, but it can change someone's entire life. He walked over carefully. "Hey there," he said softly. The girl looked up instantly. Fear filled her eyes. She looked ready to run. "It's okay," Daniel smiled gently. "I'm not here to hurt you." She remained silent. "When did you last eat?" No answer. Daniel bought her a bowl of hot soup and a sandwich from the diner. First she refused, then hunger won. She ate faster than Daniel had ever seen anyone eat. Every bite told the story of days without food. When she finally finished, Daniel asked, "What's your name?" She hesitated. "Lily." "Where are your parents?" Her smile disappeared. "They left." Daniel felt his heart sink. He called the police. After several hours, social services arrived. They searched local records. No missing person report, no family, no address, nothing. It was as if Lily had simply appeared out of nowhere. Over the following weeks, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about her. He visited the children's shelter whenever he could. Each visit, Lily smiled a little more. She slowly began trusting him. One afternoon she quietly asked, "Do people always leave?" Daniel didn't know how to answer. Instead he simply said, "Not everyone." Months passed. No relatives ever came. One claimed her. The social worker explained that Lily would soon enter the foster care system. Daniel looked around the crowded shelter. Children waited every day, hoping someone would choose them. Many never were. That night Daniel couldn't sleep. Emily had always wanted children. Maybe this was the reason life had brought Lily into his path. The next morning, Daniel walked into the social services office. "I want to adopt her." The room fell silent. The social worker looked surprised. "Mr. Brooks, you're single. I know. You don't make much money. I know. Raising a child alone will be difficult," Daniel smiled. "So, is growing up believing nobody wants you?" Months of interviews followed. Background checks, financial reviews, home inspections, psychological evaluations. Every obstacle tested Daniel's determination. Many people doubted him. One official even asked, "Why would a single mechanic want to adopt a homeless child?" Daniel answered without hesitation, "Because every child deserves someone who stays." 6 months later, the judge signed the adoption papers. Lily officially became Lily Brooks for the first time in years. Daniel saw genuine happiness in her eyes. As they walked out of the courthouse holding hands, Lily stopped. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Will you ever leave me too?" Daniel knelt in front of her. He wiped away her tears. "I may not be the father who gave you life, but I'll spend the rest of mine proving I deserve to be called your dad." Lily wrapped her arms around him. She cried harder than she ever had before. For the next 15 years, Daniel worked every overtime shift he could find. He skipped vacations. He wore old clothes. He repaired everything. Instead of replacing it, every extra dollar went toward Lily's future. He wanted her to have opportunities he never had. She excelled in school. She became captain of the debate team. I graduated at the top of her class, then earned a scholarship to law school. Daniel couldn't have been prouder, but Shortly after Lily graduated, something unexpected happened. One afternoon, Daniel was arrested. He stood in handcuffs, completely confused. I didn't do anything. The officers remained silent. Across town, attorney Lily Brooks received a phone call that made her entire world stop. Her father, the man who had rescued her from the streets, was about to stand trial for a crime he swore he didn't commit. She looked at the court notice, then quietly whispered, "No matter what it takes, I'm bringing my dad home." The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters. Camera flashes lit up the gray morning sky as Daniel Brooks was escorted inside in handcuffs. Neighbors whispered. Some shook their heads. Others refused to believe the gentle mechanic they had known for years could be guilty of anything. Daniel kept his eyes down, not because he felt ashamed, because he couldn't understand how his life had fallen apart overnight across town. Lily Brooks stared at the official case file spread across her office desk. The accusation was devastating. Daniel had been charged with stealing nearly $500,000 worth of specialized equipment from the city transportation department where he had worked for almost 20 years. According to investigators, security records showed his employee ID had been used to unlock the storage building several nights before the equipment disappeared. Someone had also transferred money into a bank account linked to Daniel's name. To the public, the evidence looked overwhelming, but Lily knew one thing with absolute certainty. Her father would never steal, not the man who had worked double shifts just to buy her school books, not the man who skipped meals so she could attend debate competitions, not the man who had rescued a homeless little girl expecting nothing in return. She whispered to herself, "Something isn't right." When Lily entered the jail visiting room, Daniel smiled the same warm smile he had worn 15 years earlier. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "You shouldn't have to see me like this." Lily shook her head. "No, Dad. You saw me at my worst. Now it's my turn." Daniel looked away. "The evidence is against me. I don't even know how." Lily leaned forward. "Did you ever share your ID card?" Daniel thought carefully. Then his face changed. "About 3 months ago, my supervisor said the security system needed updating. He asked to borrow everyone's employee cards for a few hours." Lily wrote it down immediately. "What was his name?" "Victor Collins." The moment Daniel spoke the name, something clicked. Victor had retired just weeks after the theft. No one had questioned it. Lily spent the next several days digging through records. She reviewed hundreds of hours of surveillance footage. She interviewed former employees. Most had nothing useful to say until an elderly night janitor quietly stopped her as she was leaving. "I don't know if this matters," he said, "but Mr. Collins wasn't alone the night before he retired." "What do you mean?" "I saw 2 moving trucks behind the warehouse. They weren't scheduled. By morning, they were gone." That single statement changed everything. Lily obtained traffic camera footage from nearby streets. One blurry image showed the moving trucks. The license plate was barely visible. After hours of enhancement, investigators traced the truck to a private storage company. Inside one of the rented storage units, they found several pieces of the missing equipment, but the unit wasn't rented under Daniel's name. It belonged to a shell company connected to Victor Collins. For the first time, the case began to crack. Still, the prosecution refused to drop the charges. They argued that Daniel and Victor had worked together. Without direct proof, Daniel could still be convicted. The trial continued. Day after day, witness after witness, every piece of evidence seemed to raise more questions. Daniel watched silently from the defense table. Lily fought with everything she had, but she knew one final truth was still missing. Without it, her father might spend the rest of his life behind bars. The night before closing arguments, Lily returned home exhausted. She sat in Daniel's old workshop, surrounded by the furniture he had repaired over the years. On the wall hung dozens of family photographs. One picture caught her attention. It showed Daniel teaching her how to ride a bicycle. Behind them, barely visible, was someone standing across the street. Victor Collins, watching Lily, frowned. Why would Victor be outside their house years before the theft? She searched through old boxes stored in the garage, receipts, letters, tax, records. Then she found a dusty envelope marked, "Keep safe." Inside was a small flash drive. There was no label, no explanation, only one handwritten note in Daniel's familiar handwriting. "If anything ever happens to me, Lily deserves the truth." Her hands trembled. She plugged the drive into her laptop. A video appeared. The recording began with Victor Collins sitting in Daniel's workshop. Victor looked nervous. His voice shook. "I've made terrible mistakes." Lily stared at the screen in disbelief before she could hear the rest. Her office phone rang. It was the courthouse. "The judge has moved closing arguments to tomorrow morning." Lily looked back at the paused video. Whatever Victor had confessed could save her father or reveal a secret that would change both of their lives forever. She took a deep breath, picked up the flash drive and whispered, "Tomorrow, everyone will know the truth." The courtroom was silent. Every seat was filled. Reporters stood along the walls with cameras ready. Friends, former co-workers, and curious strangers had gathered to watch what everyone believed would be the final day of Daniel Brooks's trial. Daniel sat at the defense table in a neatly pressed suit. Although he looked calm, the sleepless nights had left deep lines on his face. Across the room, Lily Brooks took a slow breath as she held the small flash drive in her hand. She wasn't just fighting for a client. She was fighting for the man who had saved her life. The judge entered, and everyone rose. After the opening formalities, the prosecutor stood confidently. "The evidence against Mr. Brooks is overwhelming. His employee credentials were used. Money was transferred into an account connected to his name. The stolen equipment has been traced to individuals who worked closely with him. The state asks this court to find the defendant guilty." The courtroom grew quiet. Then the judge turned to Lily. "Ms. Brooks, you may present your closing evidence." Lily walked to the center of the courtroom. "Your Honor, before I begin, I would like permission to play a video that has never before been presented in this case." The prosecutor objected immediately, but after reviewing the evidence, the judge allowed it. The lights dimmed. The screen came alive. Victor Collins appeared. He looked older, exhausted and deeply ashamed. His voice trembled. "My name is Victor Collins. If you're watching this, it's because I no longer have the courage to tell the truth in person." The courtroom became perfectly still. Victor continued, "Daniel Brooks is innocent." A wave of whispers spread through the room. Victor lowered his head. "I stole the equipment. I copied Daniel's security card months before the theft and created fake financial records using his identity." The prosecutor's face turned pale. Victor continued, "Daniel never knew. He trusted everyone. I used that trust against him." The room remained frozen. Then Victor said something no one expected. "The money wasn't stolen because Daniel wanted it. It was stolen because I owed dangerous people more than I could repay. I destroyed the life of the only honest man I ever worked with." Several jurors wiped away tears. But the biggest surprise was still coming. Victor looked directly into the camera. "There's one more truth," he paused. 15 years ago, I knew about a little homeless girl living behind that diner." Lily felt her heart stop. Victor continued, "Many people ignored her. I ignored her, too. But Daniel didn't. Gave her food. He gave her a home. He gave her his name. He became the father I never had the courage to be." Victor's eyes filled with tears. "If this recording is ever played, please don't remember me. Remember Daniel Brooks, the man who proved that being a father isn't about blood, it's about love." The video ended for several long seconds, and no one moved. No one spoke, even the courtroom reporters lowered their cameras. The silence itself seemed to honor Daniel's life. Finally, the judge broke the silence. "The court finds that the newly presented evidence completely undermines the prosecution's case." He looked toward Daniel. "Mr. Brooks, all charges against you are dismissed." The gavel struck. Daniel was free. Courtroom erupted in applause. Even some of the officers who had arrested him smiled. As they removed the final paperwork, Daniel stood slowly, almost unable to believe what had happened. Before he could take a step, Lily walked toward him. She wrapped her arms around him just as she had 15 years earlier outside the adoption courthouse. Only this time, she wasn't a frightened little girl. She was a successful attorney, but in that moment, she was simply a daughter hugging her father. Tears streamed down Daniel's face. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered. Lily smiled through her tears. "Only became the woman I am because one man chose to love a little girl nobody else wanted." Many people in the courtroom cried openly. The judge quietly removed his glasses to wipe his eyes. Even the prosecutor walked over and offered Daniel a sincere apology. "Judge, the evidence," he admitted. "I should have remembered to look at the man." Weeks later, the city officially cleared Daniel's name. He was honored for nearly 20 years of honest service, but Daniel requested only one thing. Instead of giving him a financial award, he asked the city to create a scholarship for children growing up in foster care. The city council unanimously approved it. It became known as the Brooks Promise Scholarship. Every year, it helped young people who had once believed their future had already been decided. At the dedication ceremony, Lily stood beside her father. Looking at hundreds of children in the audience, she smiled and said, "I wasn't saved by money. I was saved because someone chose to stay." Daniel gently took her hand. "You gave my life purpose." "Lily." She shook her head. "No, Dad. You gave me a future." The crowd rose to its feet in a standing ovation. As father and daughter embraced once more, there wasn't a dry eye in the room.